Hi students, welcome to today's video lesson. It is Tuesday, June 23rd. Today we are going to be talking about some grammar, and we're going to be going over what you're going to need to know for your no red ink assignment. And then we're also going to be talking about the author of the short story that we are going to read tomorrow. So initially, we'll talk about some grammar. So this week's grammatical lesson is about compound sentences and how to build them. So when you have a compound sentence, it means that you have two independent clauses. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how you might have a dependent clause or an incomplete thought. Well, this time we're going to talk about what happens when you want to combine two complete thoughts into one sentence, and that would be a compound sentence. So, for example, I might say, my dog is crazy and he destroyed my furniture, period. My dog has destroyed many things. He has destroyed my outdoor furniture and he ruined my mom's couch. That's all neither here nor there. Okay, so back to the compound sentence. My dog is crazy, comma, and he destroyed my furniture. So that has two complete thoughts. My dog is crazy, he destroyed my furniture, and I want to combine them, glue them together, and I'm going to put a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So our coordinating conjunctions that are most common are called fanboys. Fanboys is an acronym to help us remember the most common coordinating conjunctions. So here we have them written down. Fanboys. So F is for, A is for and, N is for nor, but is the B, or is your O, Y is yet, and then S is your so. So it's just like a silly little acronym to help us remember the most common coordinating conjunctions. So your fanboys: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So you can combine two complete thoughts, two complete sentences with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or a fanboy. A lot of students will try and put just a comma and say, my dog is crazy, comma, he destroyed my furniture. We're going to address that later. That's incorrect. So you have to have the comma and the coordinating conjunction to make a compound sentence. So here we have some example coordinating conjunctions or compound sentences that use coordinating conjunctions. You're going to see the first one. It is summer, comma, so it is hot. That is true. I highlighted the coordinating conjunction, the fanboy, in green, and then the two independent clauses in pink. I love swimming, comma, and I am going to the pool. So we have two complete thoughts. I love swimming, I am going to the pool. But they're connected as far as the content goes. We want them to be related. So instead of making it two short, choppy sentences, we put the comma and the and in the middle to show the relationship between the two ideas, and also because we don't want our syntax to be boring. Like, we don't want to have just all simple sentences for an essay that reads very dry. Okay, and then our last one here. She loves chocolate, comma, but I want vanilla. So you can see that the different fanboys have somewhat different meanings, because I wouldn't say it is summer but it is hot, because but kind of means that there's an opposite relationship coming with the second independent clause. So you just have to think about which word describes the relationship between your two clauses the way that you want it to. Okay, so sometimes you use the words for, and, or, but, or, yet, so, but you're not using them to build a compound sentence. There's other ways that you could use the word and. So you don't put a comma every single time you use the word and. Some students think that just because there's an and in their sentence, they need to put a comma with it. That is not true. I'm only specifically talking about building compound sentences. So I'm going to show you some examples of when we wouldn't need the comma. So this first one right here, it says, I love swimming and going to the beach. So in pink, I have highlighted, I love swimming. That is a complete thought. And going to the beach. If I just walked up to you and said, going to the beach, you'd be like, what? It's not a complete thought. It doesn't have a subject of that sentence. So because it's an incomplete thought, it's not a compound sentence, and I don't need the comma. So all you have to do when you're trying to decide whether you need a comma in your sentence or not is just, my mom taught me this when I was a kid, cover up the first half of your sentence and read the second part out loud. And if it can stand alone as a complete sentence, then you do need the comma. If the second part of your sentence is an incomplete thought, then you do not need the comma with your and. So I love swimming and going to the beach. So going to the beach is not a complete thought, so you don't need a comma, so it's not a compound sentence. Now, I could say I love swimming and I am going to the beach. Just that those two short words would change it to be a compound sentence, and then therefore you would need the comma. So you really have to think about whether the last part of your sentence is an independent clause or not. These other two examples of times where you wouldn't need a comma with your fanboy, it says, Jason and I will be going to the party. So yeah, I used the word and, but it's not to separate two clauses. It's to make my subject have two parts. So that's one common use of the word and that does not need a comma with it. And then I have another example at the bottom that's very similar to the first example. I won't be there, but will be home. So you wouldn't need a comma there with your but, because the second clause of the sentence is not an independent clause. Okay? So you just cover up the first half with your finger and then think to yourself, okay, does the second half make sense by itself? If it does make sense by itself, then you need to put the comma with your fanboy, because it is a compound sentence, and every compound sentence is going to have a comma fanboy, or it could have a semicolon, but we're not talking about that right now. Okay. The last portion of the grammar lesson is about something called a comma splice. So a comma splice is an error that we should try to avoid, and so in your no red ink, you're gonna have to fix some comma splices. So basically, a lot of people like to write them. A lot of students write comma splices. It says, I love cats, I love dogs, and the only thing separating those two complete thoughts is a comma. That is technically a run-on sentence. It's a comma splice is bad. We need to fix it. So we're gonna fix it by adding a fanboy with the comma. So I love cats, comma, and I love dogs. You could say, I love cats, so I'm going to get one. And you would have a comma and a fanboy in between those two independent clauses. But here we see that's the comma splice. If you said, I'm going to the park, comma, I'm going to the beach, that would be incomplete because it'd be a comma splice. Okay. If you have any questions about comma splices or compound sentences or coordinating conjunctions or independent clauses, please reach out to me, shoot me an email, and I will do my best to explain to you. I could even meet with you on Teams if you need a live explanation of me talking. Okay, the second part of today's video lesson is we are going to be talking about the author for the short story that we are going to read tomorrow. So as you noticed, the vocabulary that we did yesterday is from a story called A Good Man is Hard to Find. This story was written by a woman named Flannery O'Connor. She's a very famous author, American woman, female author. She was born in 1925 and she died in 1964. So if you're trying to picture the setting for most of her stories, it is time period wise maybe World War II, if you're trying to think about that. So definitely before internet, before cell phones, before those kinds of technologies that we have now. But also it's after electricity was invented. So somewhere in between electricity and the internet, and if you have 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, that's when a lot of her stories are taking place. So Flannery O'Connor she primarily wrote in what we call Southern Gothic style. And this is a type of writing that takes place in the American South. That's the setting. Flannery O'Connor herself was from the South. She was from Georgia. And so Southern Gothic usually has sort of like creepy elements to it. A lot of times Southern Gothic has violence. It has like decay. So on the outside, when people talk about like Southern hospitality, there's this like veneer or this facade of like politeness and smiles and manners, and like also parts of the South are very beautiful, like these old beautiful homes, and that's all nice and grand, but like underneath it, there's a lot of parts about society in the South that have been like decayed and rotten, specifically if we're looking at like race and segregation, poverty, lack of education. So it's kind of hard to describe, but basically Southern Gothic is like, yes, there's really beautiful setting and some small towns or some wonderful plantations or things like that, but then like if you investigate further, there's like a rottenness to the core or like a creepiness, and a lot of that is going to come from the racial dynamics and racial tensions in the South, because today, and more so in the past, but still today, there's remnants of systemic oppression of Black people due to slavery and, you know, Jim Crow and segregation and racism and things like that. So it's not all about race, but I think that that's like a major component of, like, on the outside, everything seems all nice and pretty in these stories, but there's like this grotesque nature of like creepiness or violence. So we could go into more of that Southern Gothic style, but the word grotesque is a good way to describe it. Grotesque is like shockingly like disturbing. So Southern Gothic is going to have like, maybe it's like ghost stories, maybe it's an old haunted house, maybe it's like a creepy like bayou plantation, maybe it's like something that seems good on the outside but is creepy or dead on the inside, ghosts, vampires, that kind of thing. A lot of the vampire stories, like the very original vampire stories, are much older, but Anne Rice wrote a lot of vampire stories that took place in New Orleans, and so that's very Southern Gothic. Like, yes, you have these like beautiful columns and wonderful architecture, wonderful culture and things like that, but then there's like this dark, creepy, twisted aspect to it. Anyway, so that's a long explanation of Southern Gothic style. And Flannery O'Connor usually had sort of like a social criticism aspect, social commentary aspect to her work, and she kind of used like humor and wit to have a sort of sardonic or sarcastic tone to a lot of her pieces. So we're going to see in Flannery O'Connor's work, you're going to see a lot of unsavory characters, a lot of violence, and a lot of touches on race and class and society, racism and classism in society. She also, Flannery O'Connor was a Roman Catholic, so she touched on a lot of religious themes in her work. She was a very devout religious woman, and you can see her really grapple with concepts like morality and good versus evil and sin and grace and a bunch of different religious motifs that appear in her work over and over again. We can see that she draws on her personal life and her personal beliefs to inform her fiction. So yeah, what she's writing is not her biography. It's not a true story. It's not an article, but her hometown, her growing up in a certain area, her religion, her belief system, it all kind of bleeds into her work. So we can see how it influences her. What else was I gonna say? So since she has these unsavory characters, it's sort of, she uses these like obviously bad characters to point out moral flaws of the system. And so we're going to see that there's a character in the story we're going to read tomorrow, and it's the grandmother, and she is annoying, she is rude, she is racist, she is judgmental, but she thinks that she is like high society and awesome and she's a lady, she has good manners, she comes from a good family, things like that. So by making this outwardly good woman actually be like a really horrible person, Flannery O'Connor is pointing out like, okay, not everyone is what they seem, and that really plays into her Southern Gothic genre. The last thing that I wanted to, or there are two other things. She won the National Book Award for Fiction, which is a big, a huge honor. And it was a lot of her works that were put together after she died. So she got this award, but she wasn't alive to see it, but it still like remembers her work and honors her. And she was diagnosed with a disease called lupus, and she actually died when she was only 39. That's like not that old. So she died young and she was sick, and so kind of sad ending for her, but her work has lived on, and she was awarded the National Book Award for Fiction posthumously, like after she has passed on. So we still see her in a lot of American literature courses, and students are reading her work. So I think that her work has prevailed, even though that she got sick and she passed away young. So that's pretty much it for today. I just wanted you to know that about Flannery O'Connor, Southern Gothic. Her work is a really good example, a classic example of the Southern Gothic genre. And also we need to really focus on, with our writing compound sentences, and properly punctuating them and properly using our coordinating conjunctions. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at sfrank2@houstoninc.org, and be ready to read the story tomorrow. Have a good day. Bye.